Good morning, everyone. We're continuing what we started yesterday, and it's talking about the Jewish people being in exile. And what does it mean that we're in exile? We've been in exile for the last almost 2,000 years, 1,900 years since the second temple has been destroyed. And since then, we haven't had really any hint of what really godliness is. Well, I think that's not exactly so. We've had hints. And the hints have been with tzaddikim, righteous Jews that are totally devoted to Hashem, to God, and they're not thinking about themselves, and they're not thinking about going to heaven, and they're not thinking about anything, only just serving God every instant of their lives. That's what these tzaddikim are. And really, every Jew is supposed to be like that. Every Jew is supposed to be aware and thinking about God and loving God and having awe, just like we do with ourselves. Everybody loves themselves. Everybody's afraid of the impending disasters that are renewed every day on the news and on the media. There's going to be a war, there's going to be a disease, there's going to be a pestilence, a plague, a pandemic, global warming, etc. So people worry about themselves naturally, but it's supposed to be not so. People are supposed to be, if you want to call it worried, afraid of being separate from God. But now we're so afraid of that. We're so afraid of what God is. Maybe afraid is not the word. It's so distant from us, this whole idea of God, that it seems to be that God, that's our biggest enemy, right? That's the biggest enemy to our individuality and our life and our freedom and our pursuit of happiness. And is God. It's the biggest impediment of all. Which there's a point to that. I mean, there's a point to that. Like there's a saying I heard once that two people were arguing. One didn't believe in God and the other one did. And the one that did said, listen, if I thought that God was what you think he is, I also wouldn't believe in it. I also wouldn't believe in it. But the problem is that we don't realize what God is. So, and the religions, they just confuse the issue much more. So let's get into what is God. So that's what Hasidus comes to try to tell us. What is God? What really is God? And why it should be important to us at all. Why do we care? Not only important is not the word. Why it's essential. Why is understanding what God is an essential element in human life? Why? He says, well, let's start off. What is God? God, first of all, basic. He's creating you and me. Creating you. You feel this? No. So how are you going to understand what God is? The most basic thing you don't understand, you don't get, you're going to understand what God is. He says, okay, do you feel? No, I also don't feel that God is creating me. I don't feel, but it's the truth. It's the truth. And because I don't feel that God is creating me, and I don't feel that he's creating me for a purpose, and so God is totally not valuable, it's not existence, not how do you say, functional. It's not part of the, it's like trying to go into a bank and do barter, bringing like 2 rabbits or something and say, I'd like to trade this, put this in my account. It's not currency. What are you going to do with God? It's nothing. But when you do start realizing what God is, then you get excited about what God is. And you want to do his commandments. But if you're not excited and you don't feel what God is, that's called exile. That's called exile. So the Jews, when they had the Holy Temple, they would go 3 times a year and they would feel that God is really creating everything. They would feel that this whole entire world is an amazing, miraculous creation. And every detail in it is just a big, happy surprise. Every detail. It's being created from nothing. That's what everyone would feel. That's in the time when there was the temple. Okay, the Jews ignored it. They misused it because the Jews still had their egos. In fact, they were a little bit bigger, even maybe a lot bigger back then. So now we're in exile. What does it mean, exile? That we don't feel godliness. We don't and perceive that there's godliness. We don't even really believe that there's godliness unless we try. And then if you start to try, then you start to believe, well, maybe it could be. And then you start, well, maybe there definitely is. And then you can even believe 100% there is God, but you don't feel it. Then you have to start working on, well, if God really exists, so I should feel it, right? I should, and if you feel that God exists, then you start to feel that your whole life is wholly in a different, what do you call it, dimension. All of a sudden, everything just sort of flips back, and you see the world in a whole different, instead of seeing it for your eyes, you see it from the Creator's eyes. Okay, so that's, and says the Rebbe, that's what it means that the Torah should be in our eyes, brand new all the time. The Torah is the living wisdom and will of God in a book. And it's in a book. True, it's in a book. So you can say, well, it's a book, like a book, any other book. Or you can say, this is an amazing miracle. This is actually the will and the wisdom of my Creator. He's creating me. That's the 10 Commandments, right? 10 Commandments, you ever read the 10 Commandments? Fourth of the 10 Commandments is God created the whole world from nothing. 6 days. Before that, there was nothing, and God created it, right? 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day, he rested. So we know the whole entire world is a big creation. And Chassidut points out that it's being created every instant from nothing. Big miracle. So I'm a miracle, and you're a miracle. Everything is a miracle. Do you feel this? No. It says, well, that's what it says. Anu shochne mata, because we're below, we say that the world is really yesh. It exists, and it comes from nothing. But at best, God is a big nothing. So the Rebbe says, how can we say that? I mean, we're religious, so you can see we're supposed to believe in God. How can you say God is nothing? God says, well, we have what we call faith. Even though the God is nothing, the world is something from nothing. So we don't understand, but we have faith. It says, but this faith it's a beginning. It's a good beginning to serve God, but it certainly is not sufficient, because it says that a thief, before he goes to steal, he prays to God for success. In other words, in his head, God exists, but in his pocketbook, God doesn't exist. He needs money. How is he going to get money? He tried his hand at opening a business or whatever. It's not good. He's good at thievery. Some people have talent. Some people are talented musicians. Some people are talented artists. Some people are talented salesmen. Some people are talented thieves. And this person is just like the musician and the artist and the salesman should give thanks to God and pray to God that they should succeed. So this person also prays to God they should succeed. It's a thief. Who made him a thief? God made him a thief. Right? He has talents. Where do you get his talents from? From God. So he prays to God. The problem is that all those others aren't against the Torah. That's okay to be a musician and this, but you're not supposed to steal. Why aren't you supposed to steal? Because that's what God said. That's what God said. God said you're not supposed to steal. Right? Maybe you can make a little bit of a sense out of it, maybe not. It doesn't, but then it makes sense. The society is based on property. You have to have property, and everybody steals property, so there's not going to be okay, but nevertheless, it's a talent. It's a possibility. God says you shouldn't steal. So a person could say, listen, God said I shouldn't steal. But that same God made me a thief. So which voice do I listen to? The one that says don't steal, or the voice inside of me, which that's me, that says yes, steal. So he says, you know what? I'm going to listen to both of them. I'm going to steal, but I'm going to pray to God that I'll be successful. So he says that's what's called faith, that you feel God, but in a very, very non-personal way. That's faith, emunah. Then there's another thing which is called making a blessing. Blessing means that you really want the world to be a good place. You want the world to be a good place according to God's standards. According to God's standards. So you're praying now, you want God to be revealed in the world. Want to be God from the revealed. It says, but in order to make blessings in the world, you have to love God first. You have to realize that God is good. So it says, therefore, first of all, you have to have love. You have to have ahava. You have to love God. Oh, okay. How are you going to love God? So you have to, love is a feeling. Love is a feeling. You can play act, you can pretend, but the fact of the matter is love is an emotion, it's a feeling. You can't have true emotions unless there's something truly lovable. Huh? If somebody else is given a check for $1 million, you don't care about that check so much, right? The check is not precious in your eyes. You shouldn't get lost. It's somebody else's name there. But if your name is on the check, it's $1 million, then the check is very valuable. You hold on to that check and you're afraid of losing it. That's love and fear. God has to be something that's not somebody else's. It's the rabbis. It has to be yours. In order to do this, first of all, in order to make blessings in the world, you have to feel that God is good, that you want him to be found in the world. You want the world to be blessed by God. Right? So in order to do that, you have to be emotional about God. You have to be emotional. They have to love. You have to see how precious and valuable God is. That it's valuable and it's yours. That by means of this, then you can come to what's called the blessings. Loving God. We love God when we say Shema Yisrael, and after we say Shema Yisrael in the prayer books, then we make all the blessings. Then we make the 19 blessings. So in other words, between just having faith in God and to make blessings in God, to actually bring God into the world, there has to be love. Oh, this is where we got up to. There has to be love. Okay. How do we get to loving God? We're talking about me and you. How do you get to love God? Me and you. How do we get to love God? So it says, I'll tell you how. Think. Think hitbonenut. You have to think deeply. Hitbonenut means to think deeply. Generally speaking, hitbonenut means to solve problems, to solve life problems. In order to solve a problem, you don't meditate. Meditation is on something that's how do you want to call it, the intellectual, right? You're removing yourself from all of your problems. It's not really personal. Meditating is not a personal thing. Meditation is usually impersonal. Impersonal. You think about some idea, the name of God, the akamatria, some meditation. You meditate. Contemplation, hitbonenut, is the opposite. It's very deeply personal. You're trying to solve a problem. What's the problem? The problem here is this rabbi here in this book that we're reading says that God really exists. This rabbi says that God is creating me. No, what's the problem? I don't feel it at all. How can that possibly be that God is creating me and I don't feel it? It's like saying, don't you see there's an elephant in your room? What are you talking about? There's no elephant. I don't see an elephant. I don't smell an elephant. I don't hear an elephant. There's an elephant. Now you want to say that God is creating. God is much bigger than an elephant. And God is everywhere. And I don't feel him at all. But on the other hand, I believe this rabbi is not just making this up. He's not just saying, Kabbalistic ideas because he's a sensitive person or he's spiritual or he wants to impress me or whatever it is. This man is really telling the truth. He's really telling me that Judaism is based on the oneness of God, which means what Abraham felt, that God is really creating everything, and he's creating everything for a purpose, and I don't feel it. That's a big problem. How do I solve this problem? Hitbonenut, contemplate. How can it be that God is creating and I don't feel it at all? How can this possibly be? What is God? So he says that's what Shema Yisrael. This is the motto of Judaism. That's the motto of Judaism is Jews, Yisrael, Jews, Shema, contemplate, think, try to solve this big problem. God is creating you, God is everywhere, and you don't feel it at all. You don't feel it at all. How can this be? Oh, think about it. Maybe you don't understand what God is. Maybe you're looking in the wrong direction. Maybe you don't know what God is, what you're supposed to be looking for. What you're supposed to be looking for. It's like a person looking for his eyes, right? Where are your eyes? I don't know. Maybe I'm blind. I don't see my eyes at all. So no, you don't understand. Your eyes. I don't look in the mirror. Don't look in the mirror. Where you see, everybody else seems to have eyes, but maybe they don't see. Maybe this I see them, and it's my imagination. But where are my eyes? Right? Where are my eyes? I don't see them at all. So it says, well, you have to understand you're looking for the wrong thing. You're trying to see eyeballs. That's not the sign that you've got eyes. The sign that you've got eyes is that you perceive colors, and you perceive shapes, and you close your eyelids and you open them up. When they're closed, you don't see. Now you do. So that's a sign that you have eyes. You don't see your eyes. You don't see them, right? So, and of course, it's a bit ridiculous because you can look in the mirror and you can see that I have eyes like everybody else does. But what about God? So it says, you want to look for God. It's a little bit different, right? It's sort of like trying to find your eyes, right? Trying to find your eyes. God is creating me. God is so close to me that I can't see him. Like your eyes. Your eyes are so close to you that you can't see your eyes because sight comes from your eyes. Your existence comes from God. So how do you start to think? So that's when it's Shema. Start to think. What are you supposed to think? Perish, Kihine, Habriya, the creation. Now, by the way, why is the Rebbe talking about this? Because we don't feel these things, and that's a sign that we're in exile. And the Rebbe is telling us how to get out of this exile. Tzion b'mishpat tepare, by means of mishpat and tzedakah. We're going to go out of it. Okay, but meanwhile, let's talk about how things are supposed to be, and that we're supposed to feel God and love God, and how the fact is we don't, and how to get out of it, how to come to love God, how to come from faith to be able to make blessing in the world. There has to be love in the middle. You have to have love. So love means you really appreciate God. How are you supposed to appreciate God? Think deeply. Hitbonenut. Contemplate. That's the word Shema means, to contemplate, means to think. Understand. Shema means understand. Hear. Hear means, do you hear me? Hear what I'm saying? It's the Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut Olam. That's the motto of Judaism. Listen, Jews, God is our God. God is one. And then afterwards, the rabbis put in, blessed is the name of the glory of his kingship forever and ever. That's what the rabbis put in. What does it mean? Listen. Perush. Yehine, Abriya, the creation, we just finished asking this question, is yesh mi'ayin, is something from nothing. What does it mean? Like it says, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam Bo'ed. Blessed is the name of his glory, of his kingship forever and ever. The world comes from nothing. What does it mean from nothing? God is nothing. It says, no. There's a step in between the essence of God and the creation. The world comes from a level of godliness which is nothing. We'll see. This aspect of God's kingship, that which God is called the king, this is not God's essence, right? This is God's kingship. Hu amachaya, this is what enlivens all the worlds. Upper worlds, Elyonim, and Memshaltacha, and also God's, we're going to go dictatorship. This is below, in this world. This is below the level of kingship. Shehu Moshel Balkorcha, that God rules against our will. He creates all these worlds even though we don't want it. We don't recognize God at all. V'shalola tovatan. This is what's called chitzoniot midat malchuto. If the worlds were given their choice, they'd say, don't create me, leave me up in the spiritual worlds. I don't want to be created. But God decrees. That's what it means. God is a king. God is a king, the king of the world. We say it 100 times every day in our blessings, that God forces us to be in existence. Who, b'chol dor v'dor, this is in all the lower generations, all the lower worlds. Sheyesh dorot, shahayu rishoyim, there's generations that were evil, like the generation of the flood. Shalo kiblu ol malchuto, they didn't receive God's kingship. The afal pikin, nevertheless, there's drawn to them tremendous life from what's called God's dictatorship. Here, the generations before the flood, people were living like 800 years, 700 years. They were living a long time, and they were all sinners. Everyone was doing all sorts of terrible sins. Why is it that God enlivened them? He said, because God wanted, that's all. It's just that God decided it. Right? He kept them alive. Kept them, and they were going against, they weren't happy to be alive, and they were making God unhappy, and they were doing terrible things, but God kept them alive. Why did he keep them alive? That's God just decided. God decided. And so that's what's called the lower worlds. The lower worlds, God rules, what do you say, is dictatorship. He decides, and that's it. Whatever he decides, that's, he called all the worlds, the upper worlds, and Gan in the Takton, and the lower heaven, which this is a tremendous pleasure, much greater than this world, until the rabbis say, Muta Ladaine, it's better for a person to be judged in hell for 70 years or whatever, and go even for one moment into heaven. Into heaven. We talked about this story before, that there was a big rabbi. We're talking about 1,000, whatever it is, 700, 800 years ago, that he was a tremendous Torah scholar, knew the whole Torah, taught everything, knew all the secrets, and he was also a big sinner. He sided with the Romans. He made trouble for the Jews. Jews, there's all sorts of Jews, and that's one of them. And so it says that one of his pupils, he interceded for him. He interceded. What do you mean interceded? They wanted to put him into hell, but they couldn't because he learned so much Torah, did so much good. So they said, okay, so let's put him in heaven. Can't put an evil person like this into heaven. And so he said, well, I'm going to intercede. I think it was Rabbi Meir interceded. And Rabbi Meir said, I'll intercede that he's going to go to hell. So he went to hell like for 7 years or something. And then there was smoke coming out of his grave. And it was worthwhile so that he should go to heaven. So they say, one second, are you really sure of this? You know what hell is? It says that one moment of hell is like 70 years of the pain of Job. That Job had these boils and things like that, like sitting on the dentist chair nonstop for 7 years with no, with no painkillers. And he goes, all the time, right? 70 years. It's worth it. No, what could possibly be worth that? It says to go to heaven, you have no idea what the pleasures of heaven are. It's worthwhile. It says, Mutav Ladaine, it's better that he should be judged and go to hell and get in order to go to heaven. And that's only the lower heaven. And then there's the upper heaven. I think we're going to have to stop here. I'm going to have to stop here. We had a power shortage. Terrible power shortage in my house. Am I still, yes? Okay. Okay, so anyway, we'll see until it stops. It'll stop on its own. That's why the creation is called something from nothing. What do you mean something from nothing?